Yo, what is up, guys? Del Boy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So a quick preview and prediction for Jermall Charlo versus Sergiy Derevyanchenko. This fight of course goes down on the 26th of September, and it is for Jermall Charlo's WBC middleweight title. This is a fight I've been calling for a long time now. Now it's officially made. I am super psyched for this fight. I think it's going to be a great scrap. In my opinion, this is certainly Jermall Charlo's toughest fight at 160 and potentially the hardest fight of his career. This really is a big test for Jermall Charlo. I'm really looking forward to this fight. I think it's an intriguing style clash. You've got the boxer puncher in Jermall Charlo and the inside fighter in Sergiy Derevyanchenko. So this is a great fight, and obviously it's part of a great card as well, with his twin brother Jermall Charlo taking part in a unification fight. So this is a great card, and this is a great fight in my opinion. Anyway, let's get on to the tail of the tape. We shall start with the champion Jermall Charlo. He has a record of 30 wins, 0 defeats, 0 draws, 22 of his wins coming by way of a knockout. Sergiy Derevyanchenko has a record of 13 wins, 2 defeats, 0 draws, 10 of his 13 wins coming by way of knockout. Jermall Charlo, he is listed as 6 foot tall with a 73.5 inch reach, whereas Sergiy Derevyanchenko is listed as 5 foot 9 with a 67.5 inch reach. So essentially, Jermall Charlo, he is 3 inches taller, and also he's got a 6 inch reach advantage, which is significant of course. Jermall Charlo, he is an orthodox fighter, 30 years old. Sergiy Derevyanchenko, also an orthodox fighter, but he is 34 years old. In regards to the records, Derevyanchenko on paper is less experienced in the pros, but he does have an extensive amateur background, and his 2 losses have come at the highest level to Danny Jacobs and Gennady Golovkin. You could argue, those fights were very close, and if he didn't get knocked down in both of those fights, maybe he would have won. Both of those fights were razor close, and in those fights, Derevyanchenko certainly has proven he can hang at world-class level at 160. Jermall Charlo, while he was good at 154, he's not really shown me too much at middleweight, so you could argue that Sergiy Derevyanchenko is more proven at 160. But, in regards to the style clash, very interesting fight. I'm really torn on this fight, who I'm picking. The style clash, as we know, Jermall Charlo's a guy who likes to sit on the outside. He likes to pop that hard jab of his and look for that straight right hand down the pipe. He is a boxer puncher. He is most comfortable at range when the pace of the fight is going his own way. That's when he's most comfortable. Whereas Derevyanchenko is a guy who likes to get past the outside, get on the inside and work you over basically. This really is a style clash. Who's going to implement their game plan on the other? I've got to say, style-wise, I do think this is a very difficult fight for Jermall Charlo. I've never really been convinced of Jermall Charlo's inside fighting ability, I have to say. I don't think he looks particularly comfortable up close, and that is Derevyanchenko's MO, to fight on the inside. So Jermall Charlo's problem in this fight, or the problem that he needs to solve, is how not to let Derevyanchenko get on the inside. Now, while Jermall Charlo is a pretty good boxer, he does all of the basics quite well. He's got solid fundamentals. I think he needs to show a bit more in this fight to effectively keep Derevyanchenko at range. Sergiy Derevyanchenko has very good feet, he's got very good head movement, and he's very effective at slipping the jab and getting on the inside. And after that, then creating angles for himself to the point where he can get some work off and you can't. He's got a good habit of getting on the inside without keeping his head on centre line. And I think, given how Jermall Charlo's been fighting in recent fights, he could have a difficult time actually dealing with that. I think in this fight, he needs to be a bit less predictable. The jab for a start, his jab is good, but he throws the same sort of jab over and over and over again. It's like a hard, solid power jab from a flat-footed stance. I want to see more versatility on the jab. I want to see Jermall Charlo mix that jab up, from body to head. Against a pressure fighter like Derevyanchenko, a good effective jab to the chest, can slow a guy down. It really can. If you're the outside fighter fighting a pressure fighter, jabbing to the stomach, jabbing to the chest, is a great tactic of slowing guys down. We saw that in the Kovalev versus Anthony Yarde fight. It's a really effective punch that isn't utilised. So I want to see Jermall Charlo really mix that jab up, go body, go head, also vary the speed and vary the power, keep Derevyanchenko guessing. And from there, fake the jab, feint the jab, and then try to draw Derevyanchenko into a hard right hand. That's one thing I'm concerned about with Jermall Charlo in this fight, is he's not really been that dynamic at 160. He's been throwing straight shots, left hooks, uppercuts, but he's not really shown any ability to set these shots up. At 154, in my opinion, he was a lot more dynamic. We saw that against Julian Williams when he knocked him out with the uppercut. Half step back, he drew Williams in, cracked him with the uppercut. He needs to show those sort of dynamic moves against Derevyanchenko, because basic straight punches, Derevyanchenko is going to see those coming. He's going to get low in that stance, slip the straight shots, and come on the inside and work. So Jermall Charlo on the outside needs to be a lot more dynamic. He needs to vary the jab up, body to head. He needs to feint, and he needs to try and draw Derevyanchenko into counters. And if Derevyanchenko does get on the inside, how does Jermall Charlo deal with that? I certainly don't think he can fight that fight with Derevyanchenko. He needs to neutralise him the best way he can. And in my opinion, that could involve a lot of holding. One shot, though, to look out for Jermall Charlo is obviously the right uppercut. He's got a great uppercut, a really, really good, powerful shot. Arguably his best punch. And that uppercut could be key against Derevyanchenko. I know Derevyanchenko doesn't usually keep his head on centre line, but one thing I've noticed about Jermall Charlo, he's actually got pretty decent lead hand control, where he'll use his lead hand to kind of make an opponent stationary, then he'll fire that right uppercut. That's what he needs to be doing against Derevyanchenko if he gets to the inside. So yeah, for me, Jermall Charlo, he needs to show improvements in this fight. He needs to be fighting better than he was fighting against Matt Korobov and Brandon Adams. In those fights, I felt he looked really flat, really predictable. If Derevyanchenko has anything left, then I don't think that sort of performance is going to be enough, quite frankly. I really don't. I think Derevyanchenko is levels and levels and levels above Brandon Adams, and probably a couple of levels above Matt Korobov. So yeah, Jermall Charlo certainly needs to show improvements in this fight. Also, I think it wouldn't go amiss if Jermall Charlo could get Derevyanchenko's respect early, catch him with a big shot, maybe drop him. Obviously, that's going to help him on the scorecards, but maybe also discourage Derevyanchenko from attacking so relentlessly. So yeah, I certainly think Jermall Charlo has the power to hurt Derevyanchenko coming in. I think he's a snappy puncher. People have questioned his power at 160, and I can see why. Obviously, he didn't knock out Brandon Adams. He didn't knock out Matt Korobov. But, I don't think that's necessarily because his power's overrated per se. I just think that was because Jermall Charlo was extremely predictable in those fights. His opponents saw the shots coming, where they could defend themselves or brace for the shot landing. I think the problem was, or one of the problems, was the fact that Jermall Charlo wasn't setting his shots up. He needs to be walking Derevyanchenko into counters, whether it's that right uppercut or the straight right hand. Also, Jermall Charlo has a pretty decent left hook. Again, that's another shot to look for as Derevyanchenko kind of crosses the outside to mid-range. That counter left hook from Jermall Charlo could be another effective shot. And lastly, I think Jermall Charlo also needs to work a lot harder in this fight than he has previously. Jermall Charlo doesn't have the highest punch output. I think he might need to up his work rate in this fight. So Jermall Charlo, I think he needs to make a lot of improvements going into this bout. As for Sergiy Derevyanchenko, my main question is what he's got left. Obviously, the guy's only had 15 fights, but he did have a very long amateur career. He is 34 years old, and that Gennady Golovkin fight was brutal. While he did very well in that fight, he took a lot of punishment. Has he recovered from that fight? I believe he went to hospital after that Golovkin fight, so he took a fair bit of punishment. So, going into this fight, I do wonder if Derevyanchenko is still at his best. That's one thing to consider. But he just essentially needs to fight his fight. I think his style, to begin with, presents Jermall Charlo with a lot of problems. He needs to be careful on the outside, obviously. He needs to keep covered up. Don't come in recklessly on centre line. Do what he usually does. Come in low, draw the lead, slip the jab, get on the inside, create the angles and work. Derevyanchenko, he needs to win this fight clearly, in my opinion, to get a decision, because obviously Jermall Charlo is the home fighter. He's the house fighter, essentially. I know Derevyanchenko does have ties to the PBC, but it's obvious who they want to win here. So Derevyanchenko, he needs to fight his usual fight, get up close and work hard, and try to win as many rounds as possible. And who knows, maybe work that body to the point where Jermall Charlo's power becomes less of a factor. And who knows, maybe even get a late stoppage. If I was Derevyanchenko, that's what I'd be gunning for, a late stoppage, because I wouldn't want to go to the scorecards in this fight. Anything close would go to Jermall Charlo. So the body attack of Derevyanchenko, in my opinion, is going to be key in this fight. We know that Derevyanchenko has a very good body game, very good body attack. We saw that against Danny Jacobs, and we saw that also against Gennady Golovkin. We've not seen Jermall Charlo sustain that sort of body work in a fight. We've not seen him deal with that sort of pressure in a fight. Derevyanchenko is coming into this fight with totally new and different attributes to what Jermall Charlo has fought previously. I don't really see Derevyanchenko as similar to anybody Jermall Charlo's fought, whereas Derevyanchenko would have seen guys like Jermall Charlo in the amateurs all of the time. So, style-wise, I think Derevyanchenko does have quite a few advantages in this fight, despite being, physically dwarfed by Jermall Charlo. And by the way, I don't believe Derevyanchenko is 5'9". I think he's closer to 5'8" personally, but there we go. So yeah, I think this is a very hard fight to call for a bunch of reasons. The political reasons, Jermall Charlo being the A-side on the PBC, Derevyanchenko's age and the punishment he took against Golovkin, and also the fact that, Jermall Charlo, we don't know how good this guy is at 160, we just don't. He's not looked great so far. Maybe that's because he's not had the fights to really get up for. Maybe it's that. Maybe this fight, Jermall Charlo shows his worth at 160 and produces a career best performance. There's so many things to consider going into this fight. But if I were to hazard a guess and make an official pick in this fight, which is what you guys want to know, I would say Jermall Charlo by controversial decision is a very, very, very realistic proposition in this fight. And that's what I'm going with. I'm going with a Charlo controversial decision. I do believe in a fair fight with fair officiating, Derevyanchenko would have a very good chance. But, I'm going with a Jermall Charlo controversial points win. Could both guys get a knockout in this fight? I think potentially, Derevyanchenko's relentlessness for body work, for work rate. Like I said, it could result in a late stoppage. I wouldn't be that surprised. And even Jermall Charlo knocking out Derevyanchenko, I think Jermall Charlo does hit hard. His only problem is that he's not really been setting his power shots up at 160. If he could catch Derevyanchenko coming in with something he doesn't see, like the uppercut, he could knock out Derevyanchenko in my opinion. Just needs to be a bit more subtle with it, a bit more dynamic. But yeah, good fight. Really, really good fight. But I've got Jermall Charlo controversial points win. Maybe similar to the Korobov fight, a fight which is kind of debated back and forth between the fan bases. But yeah, we've got Jermall Charlo controversial points. Anyway, share your thoughts below. What do you make of this fight? Who are you picking? Are you picking Jermall Charlo or Sergiy Derevyanchenko? Share your thoughts below. Peace.